What a lovely introduction. I'm going to come here every night rather than go home to my family who don't greet me anywhere nearly as nice as that. So that's nice. I'm going to be using a Miro board today, and we had a bit of a conversation with a couple of people yesterday actually. Is it Miro? Is it Miro? Is it something else? And I've been reliably informed it is Miro like Hero, so I'm sticking with that. Tim and Tom, you might need to keep repasting that as more people join. But if you can join that Miro board, that's where we'll be doing most of it. And I'm going to share my screen from looking at the board for the purposes of the recording. So you can either look at the board or you can find it your own way, and then you should be able to join in when the moment arises. So yeah, I was chatting to Tom and Tim a little bit before we started, and talking about my day yesterday. I had a very interesting day yesterday with a client, and we were predominantly talking about technical issues because we get on a little bit early to make sure that you can see my screen and all that kind of jazz, and you can hear me and stuff. But that's not actually where I'm going to start, because it was on my way home. So it was an in-person event. I'm a bit old school. I'm a little bit of a dinosaur. I do much prefer the in-person stuff to the online. And I was in person in Milton Keynes yesterday. I was driving home, which is about 2 hours cross country. And I'm not sure exactly where I was, but there was a car right behind me for a good few seconds, quite close behind me. And suddenly it just pulled out, overtook me, and cut in right in front of me. So I had to brake a little bit. And I wasn't taken by surprise. I kind of knew it was likely to happen, but still, it was a little bit of a, And my question for you, which you're more than welcome to put into the chat, or you can shout out, I'm not precious, is if you were in my position, you were driving that car and somebody did that, came right up behind you, overtook you quite abruptly, and then pulled in right in front of you, really quite close, what would go through your mind, do you think? What kind of things would you be thinking? Danger? Fear? Anger? Anxiety? Risk to life? Why? Muppet. WTF. This person's in a rush, curious, probably in a BMW. What is this person doing? Might even be some explicits in there, not safe for work. Compassion for that person. Idiot. This is good. Interesting. Interesting. Has that ever happened to you? Yeah. Well, so this is anger again. Yes, it's happened. So I wasn't planning on telling that story, but it's just so coincidental that it happened yesterday. And it's quite relevant to what I want to talk about today. So I'm not saying it was the devil that was driving that car. All right. I'm not for 1 minute saying that they were a devil. But my initial reaction is quite similar to a lot, not all, but quite a lot of what you've been putting in that box there. It was quite emotional, almost guttural of what on earth were they doing? What an idiot. That before I could think, my instant reaction was, what an idiot. And I was tempted to flash my lights, beat my horn, all that kind of stuff. It's not. It's very common for that to be the case. There were even scientific studies done on drivers where people were asked to to state their reaction, what they thought about the person who was cutting in front of them, and generally it was, what a jerk, you know. It's called the fundamental attribution error, in that we are more likely to judge other people's behavior against their character, but judge our own behavior based on the situation. So what that means is we're more likely to think that the behavior of somebody else is because of who they are, i.e. an idiot, dangerous, risky, BMW driver. But if we were doing exactly the same thing, getting right up behind a car in front, quickly overtaking and cutting in, then we would explain our actions differently. Not because not we wouldn't think that we are a jerk, we are dangerous, we're an idiot. We would be, we were in a rush, that type of thing. And some of the other quite emotionally mature comments in there. I wonder what's been going on in their day that's caused that behaviour, which in the heat of the moment is a very mature thing to be thinking about. So I'm not going to really go into the whole Rolling Stones metaphor of sympathy for the devil. If you want to explore the metaphor in a lot more, then I would thoroughly recommend you checking out Nigel Baker's talks. He's done some great talks on that metaphor, dressed up as the devil, painted his face and everything. So if you want to really explore that, for me, this is more about trying to think of other people who our emotional response is to assume that they are a bad person or have done something deliberately badly, rather than if we were doing it, we could explain it because of the situation. I'm taking an extreme view, really, to think about, well, how do we tend to see people who we don't think are on our side? Okay. And Tom mentioned my pathways, these 6-month pathways that I do instead of just training courses. And actually, whether it's the Scrum Mastery pathway or the Product Mastery pathway or the team or the leadership or whatever, there is a common thread. There are a few common threads, but one of them is around spending a lot of time on change agency, both in terms of influencing other people towards something that we know is good for the organization or good for the product or good for the team, but we need to bring them on board with our ideas, get their buy-in, or we need to change our perspective on different situations, because it's very easy to adopt our default stance. We tend to see what we expect to see. So if we can practice stepping into different perspectives and being less emotional and more mindful about our interpretation, we can be more resourceful in our thinking. So that's the plan today. Is to give you a little bit of an exploration, a little bit of a journey into that, where this comes from, what's going on for you, how you might be able to adapt to different situations and change your approach. Because I think one of the biggest challenges that most people who come along to these meetup groups are facing is getting buy-in for whatever it is that you're trying to do, whether that be trying to become more agile or get greater responsibility or autonomy or something like that, getting changes to the ways of working. And buy-in isn't necessarily about what it is that you want them to agree with. It's more about what it gives them. If anything, it's how can you help people get buy-in to you? And that is really technically empathy rather than sympathy. But the Rolling Stones didn't record a song called Empathy for the Devil. So you have to just bear with me on that one. Right, moving slightly to the right. I would like you to add your examples of where someone in your organization has done something that instills a reaction in you. Perhaps it goes against agile principles. Perhaps they do something that goes against agile values. Perhaps they do something that undermines the process. Perhaps they do something that undermines you. Perhaps they do something that annoys you. Think of some situations that can or have gone on at work. Now, you don't need to name names, but some things that go on at work that could, if you took it to the extreme, make you think, are you the devil? And they really annoy you. So take some post-it notes, add your thoughts, stick them on this canvas on Miro, and we'll see what we come up with. You're referring to agile stuff in an undermining way. What does that mean, Dan? Backstabbing. If you give me a little bit more context, just a little bit. You don't have to throw anybody under the bus. A little bit more context on backstabbing, a little bit more context on witch hunting. They're asking how are you, then immediately moving on to what they want to talk about. Just a throwaway comment, not really interested in how you are. So our agile coaches who are supposed to be supporting us actually adopting agile anti-patterns. That's really frustrating. We can tend to think badly of them. Refusing to speak to someone who's not technical. listening to speak. So I'm going to interpret that. You tell me whether I'm correct. That it looks like I'm listening, but really what I'm doing is just waiting for my opportunity to talk. I'm not actually really listening. Is that right?
Yeah, exactly that. Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you. Management joining retrospectives and passing comments. I'm going to assume comments that aren't particularly helpful, rather than they're just saying they're not allowed to say anything. Asking people in the team to do things without informing others, almost disrupting the team's plan, sabotaging the team's plan, going to the weakest link and moving their focus, divide and conquer, only having one-to-one meetings, excluding other people, putting agile innovation in our budget, but setting up waterfall projects. And mixed messages there, telling us one thing, but then doing something else and not even listening to alternative ways of doing things. Kicking people for showing courage. I'm going to assume that's a metaphorical kick, but maybe there's some workplace violence going on. Could you tell me a little bit more about that, kicking people? Or I go back to the detail about backstabbing, trying to deflect blame for something going wrong for somebody else. Take the attention away from me by throwing somebody else under the bus. Witch hunting, being more concerned with who made it. So a bit of blamestorming going on here, rather than learning, so finding out who's the weakest link that needs to be voted off the island. Using agile as an excuse, we're agile, so let's move from this to that, and let's move back to that one again. Oh, and I've changed my mind, let's go there again. Not taking accountability, a bit of politics going on. Wow, there's so much going on here. Bullying, micromanaging behaviors, controlling behaviors that reduce psychological safety. But other than that, work's fun, right? Yeah, work's a great place to be. Fantastic. I appreciate you really stretching to find something just for some content here. So these are, I was thinking about pressure on delivery, training budget being cut, told that you need to do something, being told you need to do a new role, but not allowed to actually go on training courses. You have to figure it out yourself. Being told that you've been given autonomy and responsibility, but then actually saying, self-organize like this, that type of situation. There's loads of stuff in there. Right, good. Now, maybe some of the things that other people have written will resonate with you, or that you've seen on the screen. But equally, you perhaps got your own things going on. What I want you to do is I want you to be honest with yourself now. I think when something like this happens, when somebody tells you just shut up and do as you're told, then how does that make you feel? What goes through your mind? What's your response internally and externally? And I'm going to ask you to put that on this next board, which I've entitled Triggered, which itself can be a triggering word. But this happens, and what's your instant response? Without thinking about it, what's your instant response? Why do I bother? Shock, rage, tears. They don't get it. Suffocated, don't feel valued. I'm going to try and win them over. I'm going to convince them. I'm going to go to logic. I'm going to explain the value of this. I'm going to back off. Horror. I need to get out of here. Maybe that's physically get out of the room or out of the space, out of the meeting room, maybe out of the organization. Silence. Yeah. Just a big question of why. A couple of WTFs. How can they not see this? We've done this before. I'm going to go tell Geoff about it, see what he says. Lovely. You're always welcome. I'm happy to listen. Even if it's just you can have a rubber duck Geoff on your screen. What an ass. Delusion. You can't reason with idiots. There's a saying about that, isn't there? Can't remember what it is. You try and reason with idiots. Sadness. So there's a phrase that I tend to use quite a lot these days, motivational debt, which I think would cover quite a lot of this stuff. It would demotivate me in one way or another. That's stupid. These instant responses these instant emotional responses are completely normal. We do tend to like I said, judge their character, but also another normal response, another instantaneous subconscious response is that we tend to over-personalize it. We tend to think this is actually a reflection of their opinion of us. But it's not that they are committing a dysfunctional behavior, it's that they are doing that thing to get at us or because of us. And that just makes it worse, which can start us off in a bit of a spiral. Now, in reality, it's unlikely, not impossible, but unlikely that it is about us. And it's unlikely that they are deliberately trying to screw things up, as much as it might look like it. There are very few people that I've met that deliberately want to screw things up, that deliberately want to sabotage things for the company, for themselves, for the project, for the product, for you. And when they do, it's usually, in my experience, a bit of a cry for help. So it's difficult to have empathy when you're triggered, when something has happened that's compromised a value of yours, something really important to you. And if you can't understand the logic about it as well, it's very difficult to have empathy for a situation. There are two things that I want us to look at a little bit today for these types of situations. The first one is, what can you do to help get people more on board with the right way of doing things, your ideas, acting more or less dysfunctionally and more coherently? How can I bring people around and get them on side? And the second is, how can you change your perspective on things, be more mindful about things, be triggered less, and have that trigger, if it does happen, impact you less and for less time? So those are the two things. How can you get people more on board, and how can you change your perspective on the situations to be more in control of them and more in control of you? Cool. Amazing. So many post-it notes. Absolutely loving it. Right. I'm going to move us on slightly. So first thing, building up some empathy so that we can get people more on board. People generally don't go for the logic of your idea. They will buy into you. So but our natural response, and we had a couple of post-it notes about this, our natural response is to try to win them over with logic. Why can't they see this? I'm going to explain it more. I'm going to convince them. I'm going to explain the value. And don't get me wrong, logic is a part of bringing people on board. Okay, this trust triangle, this rhetoric triangle, this logic is important. They're not going to go along with you if what you're saying is a load of nonsense. Okay, so, well, sometimes that might happen, but don't rely on that. Okay, so logic is important. So setting that out. And when it comes to logic, an interesting thing that I found is actually less is more. So a normal common response is, if I've got 5 reasons why this is a good idea, I'm going to give them all 5 reasons. But actually, people tend to focus on the weakest of the arguments, and they will judge the other arguments in relation to that weakest argument. So if idea number 5 isn't brilliant, leave it. If idea number 4 isn't brilliant, leave it. Just go with 3. Just go with 2. Focus your logic on something really, really clear, unambiguous, relevant to them, and that helps. The other 2 factors of the trust triangle in terms of bringing people on board and getting buy-in for them to you are empathy. Can you understand where they're coming from? Can you understand their position? And again, some of you were incredibly emotionally aware and intelligent with your comments. What must be going on for them to make this behavior logical for them? If I can build empathy for that, then I'm no longer an adversary. I'm potentially an ally. I might not agree with it, but can I understand it? And then there's the third part of this trust triangle, which is the authenticity. So do your words match your actions? Do you come across as genuine? Do you seem like you are on the level, that you are likable, that you have mutual interests at heart, those aspects? So looking at, well, how can I affect this relationship? Maybe I can focus on logic, and that might be about taking data away, focusing on less. Can I force myself to empathize with their situation rather than just react and think they must be screwing this up because they're an idiot or they hate me? And can I get greater congruence with my words and my actions? And if I can do that, I might start building up that relationship. They might not seem like so much of a devil. And equally, hard as it might be to think about it, they might be viewing you as less of a devil. Something that won't be too much of a surprise for members of this meetup group, because you are, a lot of you have been to a lot of these sessions before, and some of these skills have been talked about many times before, but building up that rapport with that individual through active listening. You're really, really listening to where they're coming from, understanding their points, understanding their concerns is a big way of getting that empathy and demonstrating that empathy. So playing things back, understanding, really trying to understand their point of view before you even start talking about logic. Really understand where they're coming from. Respect their time, especially if they're someone more senior. Respect the position that they're in. There could be a hell of a lot going on for them that you're not even aware of. As well as everybody's got their own stuff going on, quite often, if you're dealing with someone more senior, they've got things going on that they might not even legally be allowed to tell you about, which can explain some of the dissonance between their actions and their words. So really trying to understand, really trying to empathize, really trying to listen. This clipboard is representing what we call an accusations audit. Now, an accusations audit is a term that I picked up from Chris Voss, FBI negotiator. And all an accusations audit is essentially putting yourself in their shoes and thinking of all the reasons why they might not like, what you want, your argument, your idea, your perception. If you can show them that you can see some logical reasons why they might not like what you're talking about, that goes a huge way to building rapport. And you can even amplify that even more so that they start actually defending things that they're naturally inclined to resist because you've taken it to an extreme. But essentially, if I was in your position, I could completely understand that you'd be worried about this. You're talking about self-organizing teams. If I were you, I'd be worried that they're going to go away and make a lot of mistakes, and you're going to be the one holding the can. I would be worried about that if I were you. Yeah, absolutely, Geoff. You're right. I am worried about those bunch of idiots having. Well, hold on a minute. Let's not talk about idiots. But anyway, a bit of an accusation sort of list all the things out that if you were them, you would find absolutely normal for them to be worried about in this situation, and get them out there before they have to list them themselves. Again, you're showing yourself as someone who can see their perspective. You're a potential ally. You're sensible. You're part of the same team. And then finally, in terms of getting people bought into you, is your network. It may well be that you don't have a huge amount of time available where you can actually speak to these people and build up your relationship. It may well be that the only time you get to be in the same virtual or physical room with them is when you're talking about other sides of a particular idea or a particular argument. You don't have the opportunity to build up that natural rapport, that natural empathy, that natural trust and connection. But people do trust by levels of abstraction. So, for example, I might have never spoken to Tim before, but if I know Tom, and Tom's a good guy, and I know Tom trusts Tim, then Tim's already got a good starting point in my book. All right. So if I can build up that network and we can have greater overlap, and I know people that they know, and I can build up rapport and trust with other people, we tend to like people who are part of our tribe, who are a bit like us. So extend your tribe, expand your network, build up those connections. Equally, it may well be that this person will buy into an idea as long as it doesn't come from you. Now, that's an extreme, but it might just be that they need to hear it from somebody else. So I've been told many times that, Geoff, yeah, what you're saying makes sense, but you're an outsider. You're an external. You don't know, you're not one of us. You don't know what it's like in this company. So people aren't really going to listen to you as much as they would listen to Tom, because Tom's one of us. He's been here for years. He knows how it works. Equally, I've had people say, Geoff, you've been saying exactly the same thing that I've been saying for years, but they're listening to you simply because you're outsider and they think you're cleverer than you actually are. Who says it can make a big difference. So extend your network, build your connections. What else? I've got a little canvas down here. What else are you aware of that you can leverage, you've seen work to help people buy in more to you and get people on board more? Add your sticky notes to the other ideas board. Finding a sponsor, so someone with authority, someone with seniority, respect, who has not necessarily carte blanche, but the power to make things happen. Buy them a coffee. There's a smiley emoji there, which sort of implies that maybe that's slightly tongue-in-cheek, but there's actually a couple of aspects to that are worth bringing up. So there's an element of reciprocity. That if somebody does something for me, there's a part of me that feels obliged to do something for them in return. It's a kind of normal human thing of that's expected. That should be done. So you can, by doing something for somebody, you built a little bit of goodwill, you built a little bit, but also people bond more over food and drink. Again, it's another common historical tribal thing. Ask for time with them to really hear them out. Yeah, take them out of a pressurized situation. Listen to them in a place, in a time where they don't feel threatened. They don't feel they've only got a certain amount of time, or whatever they say may be held against them. Know them beyond their role. Yeah, understand them as people, understand their values, their drivers, what's important to them, what their goals are. Lots of offering up my time, finding some informal ways, talk to them more, show a vulnerability to show you're human. Start that process. Find a way to show your credibility. Yeah, show them that actually you can be relied upon. You can be trusted in other areas. Therefore, there's a good chance that you can be trusted and respected and relied upon here. Let them feel like it's their idea. Sounds a little bit Machiavellian, but I did get something through. I can't remember what, it was some newsletter about. It talked about the IKEA effect, where if you build something yourself, you feel greater ownership over it. There was another cognitive bias that came up recently. It's similar to that. So let them frame the solution by giving them options and letting them pick the options that work for them. I'm here with you. Psychological safety. I'm going to come on to psychological safety again in a bit. But yeah, essentially, in fact, it might be a good time now. A lot of people will talk about psychological safety. Usually when people talk about psychological safety, it's about the need for leaders to create and provide more psychological safety for their people. And that is absolutely essential. We need that, absolutely. But very few people talk about the need for psychological safety for our leaders. So imagine this is a senior leader who's come in and undermined something or changed priorities or whatever. Or we're looking to progress the agile transformation or what have you. And there's a leader that's showing a bit of resistance. Very few people talk about psychological safety for them, but those people feel vulnerable too. And I know they don't necessarily give the impression, but they are human too. And they could be scared of all sorts of things. We've got a question with a hand up. Emily.
Hi, Geoff. A couple of
Hey.
people have put in drop the rope, be willing to walk away. And I wondered if you'd had an experience like that where you've stopped and then they've come to you in the end.
Yeah. I mean, definitely timing and patience can be part of this. And I think I'm gonna try and stretch and link that to what I was talking about with psychological safety, because if I want to agree with somebody else, then there's a part of me that feels like I'm admitting I was wrong, or I'm admitting that what I was doing before was wrong or stupid. As perhaps logically ludicrous as that may actually be objectively, there's a small part of me that thinks, okay, I'm going to lose here if I agree with somebody else and change my mind. But if I give some time, then that feels less of an issue, and there's more opportunity for that change of mind to be attributed to something else. So we give somebody, there's a term that's used out there, a fake because. So allow people to change their minds without feeling like they've lost, without feeling like they've lost face. And so, yeah, walking away, not in a, well, I'm not talking to you anymore, and I know that's not what you were suggesting. But, well, if you're going to be like that, I'll be in my room. Not like that. But, okay, well, let's just give it a bit of time. And let's revisit this again later. Thank you, Emily. Mike.
So being a natural contrarian, I'll ask the opposite question. Then when is it a good idea to be confrontational?
So I'm gonna one of my favorite, is it a quote if it's taken from a song? One of my favorite lyrics is from Matilda, and sometimes you have to be a little bit naughty. And I coach a lot of scrum masters, I coach a lot of product people around being disruptive. And you can't just go around saying yes to everything, bending over backwards, pleasing it. Sometimes people need to hear something that they don't want to hear. And this is where that emotional intelligence comes in again, in terms of, can I sense the right moment? So as long as I'm not acting emotionally, and I'm not doing it out of spite, and I'm not doing it to get a reaction, I'm not doing it to make them feel pain. Generally speaking, my experience is people will take negative, confrontational, provocative messages from people they know care about them. And as long as, again, they have that psychological safety, that it's not in public where they're going to be losing face or reputation, it's delivered with care for that individual, then I think it's perfectly fine to be a little bit provocative, to be a little bit, well, hold on a minute. No, I'm going to tell you this. I'm going to give you this feedback. I know you can cope with it. I'm only telling you this because I know you can cope with it. And I like you too much to not give you this information. That type of feedback. So absolutely.
Thank you.
What do you think about that?
Yeah, I just find that experience teaches you where the balance is and where context allows you to err on one side or another. So
Yeah,
that's life, I guess.
it is. And I always couple the, sometimes you have to be a little bit naughty with a dead scrum master is a useless scrum master. A dead product owner is a useless product owner. Don't lose the war just to have a battle. Loads of ideas in there, praising them, stroke their ego, express gratitude, design experiments. I love that. That's going to be another techniques I come to. One technique that I want you to not necessarily play with right now in front of everybody else, but I want you to just have in your back pocket is what we call reframe cues. So when this happens, trying to consciously replace the instinctive thought that goes through your mind, what a jerk, what an idiot, oh, this is terrible, WTF, with something else, something more helpful. All right. So here's a few potential reframe cues that might be helpful to you. So so maybe they are the devil, but even the devil's got a job to do. All right. So let's have a little bit of empathy for them. They've got a tough job. My favorite, I've even got a sticky note on my monitor here. It's not good, it's not bad, it's interesting. That's my default mantra. Whenever I feel myself potentially getting emotional, getting triggered, okay, it's not good, not bad, just interesting. Let's explore this. What's going on here? Maybe it's just enough to tell myself, I'm not important enough for people to be taking this personally against me. So it's highly unlikely to be personal. Maybe I need to remind myself that there are very few people out there who want to sabotage the organization. Maybe there's a lot going on above my pay grade that I can't know about legally. My second favorite phrase, I think, is every dysfunctional behavior is a symptom of an unmet need. A different way of writing what I think it was Emily who wrote earlier on about the car incident. I wonder what's going on for them that makes this a perfectly natural response for them right now. It's usually, as I said, a symptom of an unmet need, something that they need to feel comfortable, to feel safe, to feel fulfilled, that they haven't got. Therefore, this behavior makes sense for them as a way of coping with that, or trying to get that in a different way. So if I can identify what need that is, whether it's safety, security, fulfillment, whatever, I might be able to help them get that need met in a different way. I might need to just remind myself, well, my thing is not as important to anybody else as it is to me. So what's important for them? Sometimes it's worth reminding yourself that actually resistance is a sign that something is happening. It's probably worse if no one cares what you say. Getting some kind of emotional response, some kind of reaction means that it's important enough for people to care about it. And that might be worth reminding yourself. But equally, and this is something that I've definitely been guilty of in the past, my response is essentially been to create another problem for that person. Now they have to deal with me throwing my toys out the pram, feeling all emotional, having an argument with them, accusing them of something, basically making their life more difficult, rather than being seen as somebody who might be able to help them remove one of their problems. So can I position myself differently? Thought, I like somebody has added a post-it note there. Between reaction and action is the time to think. Somebody tell me a little bit more about that. I like it.
Yeah, so I wrote that down. So reactions, as you say, are gut and instinctive and don't necessarily allow yourself the time to plan what the best approach is given the context, given the situation. So give yourself that little bit of time before you react to think what is the outcome that you're looking for, and then what's the best way of achieving that.
Nice. Yeah. What is the outcome I'm looking for? Remind yourself of that. And sometimes it's about that. We need to establish a ritual to buy ourselves a little bit of time, whether it is counting to 10, whether it is I'm just going to go and get a glass of water, whether it is I'm going to take a break. Maybe can we come back on this in half an hour or tomorrow morning? Buy yourself a little bit of time so that you are dealing less emotionally. A couple of other techniques that might be quite useful in terms of, as well as reflecting and thinking differently. Some of these we've covered already, but run an experiment. So it doesn't necessarily have to be, come with me, do it my way, rather than do it your way. Could we test this? Is there a hypothesis here that if it were to be true, would be useful? And rather than you having to be convinced by me, is there a way that we could set something up where we could find some data to help us with this? Quick, cheap, objective, not subjective, scientific experiment where we could actually test out our ideas. Maybe I could, going back to some of the post-it notes on the previous comment, what I call a coaching up canvas. So can I learn more about those people, who they are outside of work, what their goals, their motivations, their fears, their drivers, who's in their inner circle, who's part of their network, what their scripts are, what their stories are, what their narratives are, what kind of things get them going in the first place, what their big needs are. Anything that can help me understand them more will help me influence the situation more. Stakeholder mapping can help me identify and expand my network, bring people into my network, leverage my network, find overlaps between my network and their network. The human givens framework is something that could help me if I'm adopting the stance of every dysfunctional behavior is a symptom of an unmet need. It gives me a framework to assess, well, what kind of needs might they have that they might be lacking? And is there something I could work on in that? Sometimes it's not what you say, it's how you say it. So is the message actually tailored to them? What's important to them? Are you using the same kind of language that they use? I'm not talking about English and Geordie. I'm talking about just the kind of words that they use, the kind of metaphors that they use, the kind of sort of NLP cues that they use. If you're just on your own, you're a little bit easier to ignore. So maybe you could build a movement. We all have a propensity to act. What that means is I'm more likely to do something if a certain number of people around me are also doing it. And we've all got our own different thresholds. So it might be that I need 6 people to be doing something, to have the same opinion as me, for me to be comfortable joining that movement. But Tim, maybe he's a little bit more self-confident. Some might say cocky. But maybe he only needs 2 people or 3 people to step forward. And Tom needs 4. And you know, if he can get Tom on board, he's one step closer to getting me on board. But can I build a little bit of a movement? Not to gang up on somebody, but just to build this sense of social proof, this sense of there's a lot of people that think there's some value here. And strategic alignment, solution focus tend to speak for themselves, but pass the credit, I think, is an important one as well. If what I'm interested in making happen, changing behavior, adopting a new thing, adopting a changing process, that's what's important to me. Not getting the credit for making it happen, I'm more likely to make it happen. If I can let the credit go to somebody else, let them have the win. I don't need the win. I just want the change. I just want the benefit. That's all I need. The focus on passing the credit. Somebody else's idea, not mine. Don't just make them feel it was their idea, but give them the credit as well. Right. Last thing before we go. And how are we doing on?
Really?
Somebody ask a question? Oh, just someone in the background. Delivery has arrived. What I will actually do, no, I won't. I was going to do breakout rooms, but I won't. So instead, I will ask you to just have a look at some of these scenarios and think, based on what we've talked about, how might you go about dealing with these? Look for the possible reasons behind the behavior. How could you build up relationships? How could you change your perspective on things, get buy-in to what you want to do? Set yourself up to be more resourceful. To start off with empathy for the devil rather than sympathy for the devil. Try and understand what's going on. Then think about how you might go about building up that relationship, making it easier for a different course of action, both for them and for you to stay mindful in that situation rather than emotional. That make sense? So the first scenario, someone comes along and says, I know you've made your plan, but this is really important. So you need to drop what you're doing and do this now. I mean, this is purely hypothetical. You have to really try hard to imagine this happening. Another one, we don't have the budget for training or coaching, so you're going to have to figure this out on your own. Third one, the plan isn't good enough. We need more stuff sooner. Let's see if I can pick one from over here. The fourth scenario. This one. Have that one. They're asking you to be deceptive or lie about what's going on. There's scenario 4. All right. So you can add to any of them. You can pick any of those scenarios. I want you to think of these things then. So what might be going on here? Really try and work out some empathy. How can you empathize with this situation? Not emotionally respond to it. How might you be able to go about getting a little bit more buy-in for change in behavior? And how can you adopt some kind of rituals to help you adopt a different, more resourceful perspective? See what we come up with.
So this isn't going into challenging mode, is it, Geoff? This isn't about challenging at all. This is just about.
Well, so I'm going to leave it there. I'm not going to answer that question definitively. So what I'm looking for is, can you empathize with their situation? Can you try something that might encourage different response in them? And can you adopt something that will help you be more resourceful in interpreting the situation. Okay, so we're starting to look at overall priorities. Got a tool that we could use to look objectively rather than just subjectively. Can you work with us? What we could drop? We're happy to help with this. We've already said drop this. Maybe we need some help with how we go about dropping it. Tell me about your pressures. Tell me about the situation. This must be really difficult for you difficult choice you've had to make here. Tell me a little bit more about it. Okay, plan's not good enough. What do you mean by stuff? Tell me more about what you need. Tell me about the pressures you're under. How can I help other than just changing the plan? Let's discuss it with the team, see what's realistic, getting a little bit of an alliance there. Find out why. What exactly do you mean that the plan is not good enough? I haven't got the budget. Okay, I like to learn. I can do this. But something has to stop to let this happen. What should I stop? How can you help me create the space so that I can figure out what you need me to figure out? I'm curious. How can we collaborate? Curiosity is a superpower in these situations. So showing some curiosity rather than judgment, emotional responses. If I haven't got time to do it right, is there enough time to do it again differently? So is there space for me to learn by doing if I haven't got time to learn how to do it right in the first place? What do we have as a company that we can offer instead? Okay, so looking for alternatives. We language being used there rather than you. Lots of we. This is good. How can I help you? Is there something that we can look at together? Generally speaking, you language is a little bit more provocative. Asking people to explain and justify their decisions will lead more often than not to defensive responses rather than collaborative responses. There's a lot of good stuff in here. Be vulnerable about how overwhelming this is for you. Ask for help. So then you go first. Sense of asking, not just sucking it up. What's important for our customers? I want to ask this person about their values without sounding confrontational. Is there a way that you can do that? Which situation is this getting us out of? Okay, what other options do we have? So you're not necessarily saying no, but is there another option that we've got? Maybe there's a more attractive option. Transparency could impact psychological safety positively. Okay, what happens if we aren't transparent about this? Explain why you find it difficult, how it affects your values. Nice, if it does, maybe it doesn't. Wow, cool. Nice one. I'm amazed at the amount of sticky notes we've got on here. This is brilliant. Why do we have this need? What's the driver for this decision? Understanding why. Not getting out of this assumption that this is a really bad thing, that this person must be bad, that they must not like me, the world's against me. Isn't this WTF? Brilliant. Nice resourceful thinking there, nice empathy for what's going on, building those relationships. All right, thank you very much. Conscious of your time. But I've got a few things coming up. If you're interested in this, I do a lot more on coaching up. I've got a coaching up workshop, 75 minutes, building up relationships, building up that empathy, going into that coaching up canvas. Do 6-month pathways for Scrum Masters. They don't have to be Scrum Masters. Anyone who's interested in building teams, building a different organizational culture, change agency, got our on-demand courses. I do online coaching sessions and some tools, some psychological tools around influencing and persuasion, if you're interested in that. Have I got time for some questions, guys?
You have, Geoff.
Okay.
Yeah. So if you've got a question for Geoff, stick your hand. I can't see your hands up at the moment, and can't see any in the chat. But if you have got any questions, either stick your hand up or put them in the chat, and we'll try and get through as many as we can.
Richie, how you doing?
Good. How are you, Geoff?
Yeah, lovely. Good to see you.
Good to see you. what are the specific ways through which we can gain trust from leadership? Because if the teams are new and we are kicking off anything new in the organization, first we need to gain their trust. So can you suggest some techniques to gain their trust so that they can support you or support your launch in front of team sometimes if it is required?
You're absolutely right. There's got to be an element of trust in this if we're looking for something from somebody else. Why should I do something different for you? And we spent a lot of time talking about how this might not be for me, it might be for both of us. But trust is a big part of it. The good news is that while trust can be quite difficult to build, it's not binary. So I can build trust slowly but surely. So I can get a little bit of trust quite quickly. And that trust can be reinforced. That could be through experiments. It could be trust me on something smaller, something less risky. It could be simply about building up rapport, because I generally trust people who I have rapport with, who I think are a bit like me, who listen to me, who have empathy for me. I generally trust them more. I don't need to have full trust. So I don't need to trust that you are a person that will never break the law, that has full integrity in every aspect of their life to be able to have a business relationship with them. It could be simply contractual, what we call contractual confidence, rules-based trust, where you know that if I do something bad, there are explicit consequences that we're both aware of. That might be enough trust. And if we do that enough times, you might actually see that I'm quite capable at what I profess to be capable of, and you trust my competence more than the rules. But whatever it is, starting where they're comfortable with trust, and maybe ask the question, maybe it's an accusations audit. If I was in your position, I probably wouldn't readily trust me. Now, I don't know, you don't know enough about me, you don't know enough about the situation, and ultimately you're the one who's going to be responsible for this. So if I was you, I'd want some more confidence in me, my ability, and my background. So here's some information, here's some references, here's some stories, here's some people that can vouch for me. Maybe that's enough. But that empathy of, well, if I was in your position, I would find it quite difficult to trust someone here. So what would you need? What could I do that would increase your trust in me? Does that help?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you for the question. Anybody else? Mike, welcome back, sir.
I feel like I'm monopolizing.
Not at all.
Less a question, more an observation. So I wrote a note to myself here. I'll just read to you. So I called it an observation from the guy in the mirror. So what does this teach us about how we come across when we convey diktats rather than having collaborative conversations? So I think we've looked at the conversation through the prism of an us against them, but when we become the them, I think we need to be aware of when we become the them so that we know how we're coming across as well.
I think it's a fantastic point. And I can only speak for myself here, but I find that the more that I can empathize with other people, the more that I start seeing those behaviors in me. And I become more self-aware of when I'm doing that same thing. There's many philosophers and psychologists that will tell you that everything that annoys you in other people is a reflection of something in yourself. Now, I'm not going to get as deep and philosophical as that, but I think there is real value in what you've just said there in terms of if there's a potential for us to see other people as the devil, there's just as much opportunity for other people to see us as the devil. Yeah. So can we empathize on both counts?
And sometimes it becomes easier for us to see what other people are doing to us. It becomes far more difficult for us to really put up a mirror and see how we're coming across to other people.
Yeah. Thank you for that observation. Anybody else? John.
Oh, got John.
I don't want to put I definitely don't want to. I hope there's another question after this because this one might be slightly pessimistic. So I'll go with it. So is there a point at which you would walk away? So and I mean, don't just step back for a moment, but actually think I'm either the wrong person here, or actually it's this isn't going to work. So I suppose that's flags. Yes, man. Interesting. What personally your flags are that you might go, okay, this isn't right.
Yeah. So I think there is a point. And I said there's very few people in the world that want to sabotage the organization, the project, and me. Usually when that does happen, it's a cry for help. But there is a small minority that actually it's a destructive environment. And for my own well-being, it's probably best for me to just disengage. I think I've been guilty in the past of giving up too soon on those relationships. And there's one person that specifically comes to mind. I won't name them, but they were such a resistor, such a vocal and practical underminer of things. And it was really draining. And we tried all the building relationships, and we tried all the empathy, and we tried all the understanding. And you know what? Just got to let this one go. And what damage can they really do? And maybe a month or so later, I don't know what it was. It might just be that we left them alone. It might just be that they didn't have anyone to fight against anymore. But they turned into one of the biggest advocates for what we were trying to do. And me and a couple of colleagues were standing thinking, are you hearing what I'm hearing? Because they're just saying what we've been saying to them for ages and they've been denying. But I don't know what it was. But yeah, we walked away perhaps a little bit too soon. Maybe it was the right thing to walk away in that situation. So I don't think it's a pessimistic thing. I think there's an element of self-care in there, that knowing actually I've done enough. I've tried again, and I'm not giving up out of spite. I'm not giving up as a childish reaction. I think actually the best thing to do for me is to walk away here. Maybe it's an opportunity for somebody else. Maybe it's an opportunity for them to think. Maybe it's an opportunity for them to fail and experience things. And as long as I'm not there saying I told you so, I'm there to help them if they want help later on, then I think that's fair. Thanks for posting that. It was young. Tristan, thanks, Tristan. So Richard, you're back.
Yes, I'm back. What could be different ways to make leadership understand, to accept and enhance the failure culture? Because in Agile, failing fast is pretty common, acceptable, and I think it should be supported. So any ways you would like to suggest how I can support them in understanding overall failure culture and then being supportive to that? Not all the time. I'm not asking like, oh, okay, let the team fail, but at least when the teams are forming in a forming stage and they have not performed too much.
Yeah. So if you'll permit me, I will try and split that out, because the actual fundamentals of that is a separate topic, but there are some significant overlaps with what we've been talking about here, which is, can I empathize with why they would be resistant to embracing and supporting a failure culture? And that could be language. We talked about tailored communications. It could be that the F word is something that they are inherently afraid of. They don't want to have the word failure associated with their career. They're not psychologically safe enough to experiment. Maybe they don't understand what we mean by failure. What does that mean for them? What are going to be the consequences for them? They've got to where they are because of doing this. Now you want to do something different. That's a scary proposition. So having empathy for that. Maybe they don't know how to fail. And maybe that's an accusation audit aspect that we could come up with. Maybe we could help them understand what that means. Maybe we just need to change the word, but also maybe we need to get some tools. So rather than actually the culture, the failure culture itself, being able to empathize with why this is a natural response for them and meet them where they are and see how I could change things to make what we both want more possible, whatever that may be. And this is just an example of the failure culture. Is that okay?
Yeah, for first part, because we splitted that question, right? So
yeah. And that second part is for another day when we've got another hour and a half. Thank you.
Thank you.
Cool.
Great stuff.
How we
Can't see any
doing?
more hands. No more questions in the chat. I can see a lot of thanks in the chat for people who've dropped off as well, Geoff. So a lot of gratitude in there. A lot of people saying they've took a lot away. Oh, Ashlyn. We've got time for one more, Geoff.
Yeah,
Oh, I think Yelena was there first.
I think Yelena was there first. Yelena, do you want to go first? I can ask him tomorrow.
I'm muted. Please go first.
Okay, no problem. So Geoff, it was just on techniques that, well, if you have people who have maybe that view that people are out to sabotage each other and people aren't coming to do their best, you know, if you're trying to then coach them, have you any advice or techniques that you've used to help them move from that? You know, and it's not necessarily they're doing it against you, but they are expressing those opinions and showing that. So I'm wondering if you've anything that you use to help coach them through that kind of situation.
Yeah, so and this is a very flexible technique. I use it in a lot of these situations, but it's probably my go-to, or one of my go-tos in a situation like this, which is called perceptual positions. That we tend to see what we expect to see. And so if I've already formed this opinion somehow that this person has negative intent or is trying to sabotage things, then I would typically see examples that back up that view, a bit of confirmation bias creeping in. So I might need to force myself to adopt a different stance. So can I look at those same behaviors through a different lens or wearing a different hat where I'm assuming positive intent? So what actually would I be able to say and pick out that would be examples of them being positive? And it would be hard, and it might be that I need to involve somebody else in this, but being able to step into different positions, sometimes literally actually move to a different part of the room, sometimes put on a hat or something, but look through a different lens and interpret the same situation in a different way, consciously, mindfully, forcefully, that might help me see things in a slightly different way.
Thank you. Great.
Thank you.
Elena, do you want to go next?
I think Elena's just
Hello.
changed her mind.
No, I had an issue with
Oh,
my
there you
laptop,
are.
so I joined late. So you probably went through a lot so far, and I will ask for a link if it's not a problem to meet on board. But I think that some things were covered by Ashlyn. What I wanted to say is, we do know, I feel for me personally, maybe someone else feels similar, it is not difficult to empathize when we look at them as humans, which means we are all by default afraid. We are all by default afraid of being judged, afraid of change, afraid of when you're a manager, you have a lot on your backs. We expect a lot of them too, even when we really try to empathize with them. At least this is how it is in my world. I can feel this burden on their backs too. I feel they have a lot to think about. So how do we look beyond that? Beyond the fact that, yes, of course, we understand they are afraid. We have to understand that. We cannot judge them for that, or for they're not actually seeing what we're trying to achieve. What do we do? Do we go small? Do we drill where we can? Do we give up on something and take something else? You were talking about giving up, like small wins, or be influential where we can and hope, because we can say whatever we want. They will not budge. They will budge if we show them. Does this make sense?
I think so. So maybe change our expectations to what's possible. So,
Yeah.
talk about meeting people where they are and understanding where they're coming from, but also what they're capable of, and what's enough. So we may well have an idea, and it could end up being idealistic and unrealistic for this particular person at this particular time. But enough might just be we start building up a relationship, a little bit of trust in each other. That might be the win. So reframing our perspective in terms of what our desired outcome is here. And it's not giving up.
Yeah, it takes time though. We
Sure.
learn that some of us are impatient by nature. It takes time. but also for them, does it feel for them that it takes too much time? What do we do? What do we say? How do we make them understand that so we all can be a little bit more patient, because it does take time?
There's no easy answer to that one, but I think acknowledging that, or even just making it explicit that I'm not in a rush, which is really hard when our organizational culture is making us feel like we are in a rush, when everything needs to happen yesterday, and we haven't got time for all this stuff, and we're rushing from one meeting to another, and all that. So if we can create that sense of space, again, quite a few people put these post-it notes on earlier on, so it's their wisdom, not mine. Can I create some space, a little bit of time, and just blow things down a little bit? When we rush, we do tend to rush to judgment. We do tend to take shortcuts. We do stop seeing people as humans. We start seeing them as impediments. So I love what you said there about seeing them as a human, and it's a lot easier then to empathize with them. Thank you.
Thank you.